Hey guys, Chaz at Black Horse here. So we don't normally work on Jaguar, but when we do, it's something like this XJ220. Just doing a very basic service and checking on the car. It was purchased not too long ago by the current owner. Had a lot of work done right before we bought it, and he just wants to check up on it and do an annual oil change, things like that. Make sure it's good to go. Doesn't get driven a ton, so shouldn't be much to worry about, but we're going to go look over it. I'll show you some of the inner workings of the XJ220 in case you haven't seen it. There are some pretty interesting design techniques to this. It's a lot different than Ferrari and Lamborghini. So as you may have noticed, the Jaguar XJ220 is a very strange configuration. So it's a very long car. It's I think around 17 feet long. It is a V6 twin turbo. You'd imagine a car like this would have a big V12 or something like that, especially being from Jaguar. This twin turbo V6 is quite powerful, as the car is I think capable of achieving close to 220 miles an hour. But the layout is what's very interesting. Now, they've designed this car very differently than most supercars of its age, and I want to show you a little bit more detail on that. So here we are in the engine bay. This is the V6 twin turbo that I just mentioned. Now, you'll notice one thing. Proportionally to the car, that is a very small engine. I mean, this is a very long car. It's actually 16.25 feet long. So you got this tiny little V6 twin turbo. They're mounted down here. And then the rest of the car is pretty much transmission and gearbox. So it has this crazy heavy-duty frame chassis that wraps all the way around the transmission and the gearbox. The cantilever suspension you can see back here. You can see the upper control arm, and then the strut's mounted down center. It's actually mounted right next to the transmission. Sway bar is up here on top, and then everything else pretty much lays out as you'd imagine. Now, obviously, in a car this size, it'd make a fantastic road car for traveling, right? I mean, 16.25 feet long, you should have tons of trunk space. Just kidding. So this is the entire trunk of the Jaguar. The exhaust and all is mounted below that. You have your 6 CD changer, you have one cubby spot up here, and then you have this very shallow trunk. And when I say shallow, I mean probably that for a briefcase. You'd have trouble fitting a backpack in here. Not a big deal though, right? It's a rear-engine supercar, so obviously the trunk is in the front. Just kidding. This is where the cooling fans are, and they vent out of the top of the hood, so there is no actual trunk in the front. I've got the panel out here for brake flush and service like that, but you can see all the AC lines. The washer tank's actually down here. It's not in the front of the car like many. And the HVAC control box, or fan box, I should say. Another minor detail that I thought was pretty interesting about this car is the frameless design with a frame. Now, what I mean with that is usually if you have a framed door window, the frame goes around the exterior and it's what seals against the car, and then the window goes inside that frame. Not so much on the Jaguar. The window actually slides up the exterior of this frame, and you can see that the edge of the glass is the edge of the door here. It looks really cool, and it's a pretty clean design, but I'd be kind of worried about the sensitivity to that. Any tool or any rock or anything hits the edge of this glass, bad day. Now we move on to the bottom side. Now this is all normally covered up by this completely carbon fiber rear belly pan / diffuser. It's held on by 56 M6 bolts. Sounds awesome, right? But yeah, it's a pain in the butt to get off. It's a ton of work. Anyway, belly pan removed. Pretty massive piece of carbon. So now the bottom side of this XJ220 is a pretty interesting piece of technology. Keep in mind, this car was built, this one in particular was a 93. Design elements of this are very different than almost any car I've seen. Now, it's not uncommon to see a rear subframe assembly that has major frame rails that hold the car together. and support the engine and the transmission. But this one's very unique as it's all milled aluminum. Now I'll give you some up close shots of that here in just a second, but here is the oil sump. So the bottom of the engine itself, there's the V6, and it even looks bigger here than it really is. The front of the engine actually falls about where this flange is here, and the rear engine's right here. So this entire engine is, what, 18 inches in length. It's very small V6. And then this massive assembly, which actually goes further back into the rear bumper, is the transmission. This is a pretty massive piece of equipment. So you got a small little starter here. You've got oil tank over here. You've got intake assemblies. You've got your turbochargers on each side. Pretty spaced out, honestly. Intercoolers are mounted in the fenders. You can't see those from there, but I'll get you some up close shots. So these are those milled aluminum rails that support the engine and transmission, and they go all the way from the rear firewall right here behind the seats all the way to the back of the car. They've got a few crossover pieces here. They're bolted together. Control arms are super long, honestly. They go from inside of the wheel all the way to that center channel, so you've got quite a length of control arm. So your drive axle's up here in the dark. Turbochargers are right here. Intercoolers tucked in back there. AC compressor. This car does have air conditioning. It's quite nice. Spacious engine bay, honestly, particularly from the bottom. All right, guys, that wraps up this XJ220. Service is completed. Everything's buttoned up. Checklist is finished. I'm going to pull it out here, take it for a very short test drive to the end of the business park and back. Make sure everything's operational. No weird lights, no weird sounds. It'll be good to go home. All right, guys, time for a quick, short test drive. So before I start it and make a bunch of noise, some interesting parts about the inside of this car. You'll notice there's gauges in the door. This is the boost gauge, the transmission temperature, the clock, and the battery voltage. Pretty interesting. Obviously this car is already like a spaceship from the outside. The inside is not much different. You got your air conditioning controls, your radio, window switches are in the center, reverse is to the left down with a safety switch, and then you have 5 speeds up. Buttons are all pretty normal for its age, and the gauge cluster is honestly pretty normal for its age. So let's go for a quick ride. Priming the pumps to start. Clutch down, out of gear. Fires right up. Alright, no warning lights, no issues, oil pressure is good. I do have low fuel, it's below a quarter tank, so it turns on a warning lamp for that. Engine's at full temperature because I just set the oil level, and the oil temperature is at about 75 degrees Celsius, which is good. We have 3,626 kilometers on it right now. I'm going to take it for a very short drive right through the business park and back just to make sure we have no issues. Clutch on it is like any other sports car. It's a little stiff, but it's completely tolerable. Drives really nice and easy and smooth. All right, let's go. Staying out of boost. This is not a power test of any kind, just making sure she drives good. Alright, already at the end of the park. A wide turn, such a long car. Bring it in real tight. And as you can tell, the turning radius is terrible. So I'm going to give it a little back up here. No power steering. Right back down the road. Now I'm told the car is fast. I'm not going to experiment with it as it's not mine. I hear too many stories about shops making poor decisions like that. However, the owner is a friend, and if I get the opportunity, I'll take us for a ride. I forgot to open the door, so I'm going to stop here and go open up. Hope you enjoyed the ride. I know it wasn't a super long one, but if you got any questions about it or anything you want to know about this car, feel free to comment below and let us know and see what we can answer.